Thank you for coming out tonight on short notice. We got this program together in the last few days. We are glad that you are here, those of you who are here, and we hope some more will come in later. We are overwhelmingly proud that the contact person from the Northeast Texas Rural Heritage Museum of Pittsburgh, Texas, got in touch with us to inform us that our dear friend Dr. Jefferson was there and wanted to come Carthage way. And of course we were so happy to have her come and speak to us. If it weren't anybody here but the family, we would still be proud. Her cousins are all here, and Dr. Jefferson, they're going to sing tonight. We're glad to have you. We would like to thank a few people. Mr. McClure has been wonderful. He contacted us and he has worked with us closely on trying to get this program together. And of course we would have to thank the Carthage Independent School District, especially Mr. McQueet, who willingly gave us the facility. Under the circumstances, we were in dire need of somewhere to do this. We appreciate Mr. Charles Thomas, the city manager. He has worked with us very closely, and all of this was done on short notice. We appreciate it. Now, Miss Yolanda Brown, we just called Miss Brown yesterday, I believe, and she is here to cooperate. Our first selection will be a patriotic number done by Miss Clara Jones and, of course, Mrs. Yolanda Brown, assistant principal of Baker? I'm forgetting your school, Libby Elementary School.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the watch fires of 100 circling camps. They have built him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the demon flaring lamps. His day is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah.
Reverend Gardner, are you in the house? Where are you? Will you pray for us, please?
Shall we bow for a moment of prayer? Our Father, God of the universe, Thou who has brought us thus far on the way, we thank you for life. Master, it has not been all that we've wanted it to be. It has not been all that mankind expected it to be. And we're aware of the fact that it has not been all that you would have had it to be. But we thank you, Master, for life, health, and strength, and for all that thou hast done for us. Bless thou this meeting. Make thyself one in our midst, that the things that we do here tonight will be of importance and remain in our remembrance for the remaining days of our lives. Bless all for whom it is our duties to pray. Forgive our many mistakes. Remember our sins against us no more. Guide us and direct us through the further scenes of this inconstant life. And Master, when we like tired souls must shuffle off these mundane shores and swap time for eternity, take us home to live with thee, where every day will be Sunday, where Sabbath will have no end. There give our souls a resting place somewhere around thy throne. There we'll praise thy name forever. This is our prayer. Through Christ we ask it, and for our sake we pray.
It's time that I'm going to come to the microphone. We're going to follow the program as printed. I think we will be able to do that hereafter. Fair Play Choir.
So glad trouble don't last away. I'm so glad trouble don't last away. I'm so glad trouble don't last away. I'm so glad trouble don't last always. It may not come when you want him, but it's on time. On time. In time of trouble, I found him to be a friend of mine. Of mine. When storm clouds rise, oh Lord, I know he'll be there. Be there. And all of my burdens, he's gonna help me bear. I'm so glad trouble don't last always. I'm so glad trouble don't last always. Whoa, he may not come when you want him, but he's on time. On time. In time of trouble, I found him to be a friend of mine. Of mine. When storm clouds rise, oh Lord, I know he'll be there. Be there. And all of my burden, he's gonna help me bear. Trouble don't last always. I'm so glad trouble don't last always. We've been made endure for a night. Keep the faith, it will be all right. We've been made endure for a night. Keep the faith, it will be all right. Trouble don't last always. No, 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 trouble don't last always. Trouble don't last always. No, 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 trouble don't last always. Trouble don't last always. No, 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 trouble don't last always. We've been made endure for a night. Keep the faith, it will be all right. We've been made endure for a night. Keep the faith, it will be all right. Trouble don't last always.
On the battlefield, on the battlefield, on the battlefield for my Lord. I'm on the battlefield, on the battlefield, on the battlefield for my Lord. I am a soldier in the army of the Lord, and I must fight, although I must cry. He's my rock, and he is my shield. I am on the battlefield for my Lord. I'm nobody crying. Don't worry, no, no. On the battlefield, on the battlefield for my Lord.
Good afternoon to Dr. Jefferson, other members on the platform, relatives of Dr. Jefferson, old acquaintances of hers, and all who are assembled. On behalf of the Turner Alumni Association, we extend a hearty welcome to each of you tonight. Let's take a minute and pause, go back in time. Do you recall some of your childhood fantasies? A high tree stump that would be your throne? The rays of a sunset would glisten the walls of your make-believe castle, that one day someone in your past would become a distinguished person and you would be in their midst. Today, all of these imagined experiences have become a reality. Our childhood wish is tonight true. Someone from our past is here tonight, making a reality come true. We thank each of you for coming and sharing in this experience with us and hope you will enjoy. Thanks again.
Yesterday, when Mr. Wheat called and asked me if I would come welcome Dr. Jefferson on behalf of the Carthage Independent School District, I told him that I'd be more than happy to, because last year I had the privilege of visiting with Dr. Jefferson several times by telephone. We were trying to arrange a program out at our school, involved a career day, some things that would be really exciting for our children, and we were looking for what we considered to be very positive role models that children could look up to these people because of the fact that they were extremely successful and that they had an education. And in Carthage Independent School District, we're trying to arm all of our children, regardless of who they are, with an education, because that's the one thing that we can arm them with that's going to protect them in the future, that protect their financial future and protect their families, etc. And so Dr. Jefferson, I told my wife the first time I talked to her on the phone, I said, I've never seen this lady before in my life, but this woman's an inspiration to talk to just visiting with on the telephone. I hope that she'll get to come. And unfortunately she didn't. We tried numerous things, even to the point of trying to hook up via satellite to our school that morning just for her to do the introduction, and I was real excited to know that she was coming here and would visit with us and hopefully have a tremendous impact. I know we made a videotape for our school this afternoon that we can use from time to time, that more of our young people will get to hear her speak and get to hear the things that she has to say. To me, I know she has many important messages to deliver to us, but the main thing is that this lady has done a tremendous job and is successful in what she does because she is educated and because she has worked diligently to get an education, and that doesn't come easy. And Dr. Jefferson, on behalf of the Carthage Independent School District, it is nice to meet you for the first time in person, and it's nice to welcome you here, and we're glad to have you. Thank you very much.
It's just amazing to see what the Lord has done. It's just amazing to see what the Lord has done. It's just amazing to see what the Lord has done. See what the Lord has done. It's just amazing
amazing. To see what the Lord has done. It's just amazing. To see what the Lord has done. Look and see what the Lord has done. It's just amazing to see what the Lord has done. You claim the victory. The battle is already won. Through Christ the Jesus, God's only Son. And I'm a living witness to what the Lord has done. It's just amazing. To see what the Lord has done. It's just amazing. To see what the Lord has done. It's just amazing. To see what the Lord has done. Look and see what the Lord has done. If you put your trust in Him, He will bring you out. My God is able. I don't have no doubt. If you put your trust in Him, He will see you through. It's just amazing what the Lord can do. It's just amazing. To see what the Lord has done. It's just amazing. To see what the Lord has done. It's just amazing. Look and see what the Lord has done. See what the Lord. Oh, people, look and see what the Lord has done.
You graduated at age of 15, the valedictorian of your class. You were bound to be successful. No one had to ask. You're example for many and will for always be. And on behalf of Turner alumni, I present this corsage to thee.
Thank you. Dr. Jefferson, from the city of Carthage, I present you the key to the city. And you are always welcome. This is to let you come in and wear your long white robe anytime you would like to. Thank you. God bless you.
He looked beyond my fault and saw my need. Amazing grace shall always be my song of praise, for it was grace that bought my liberty. I do not know just why he came to love me so. He looked beyond my fault and saw my need. I shall lift mine eyes to Calvary to view the cross
feel no waste time, yes. I come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. Oh no, I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. I don't feel no waste time. I come too far, Lord, from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road was gonna be easy. Oh no, I don't believe he brought me this far. I said I don't. He brought me this far. I said I don't. He brought me this far. I don't believe he brought me this far. I don't believe he brought me this far. I don't believe he brought me. I don't believe. I don't believe. No, no, I don't believe. I've been sick, but you brought me. I've been in trouble, but the Lord brought me. I've been friendless, but he brought me. I've been lonely. Oh, don't leave me. Don't leave me, Jesus. 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 No, don't leave me. Don't leave me, Jesus. No, don't leave me. Don't leave me, Jesus. I've been sick, but the Lord brought me. I've been in trouble, but the Lord brought me. I've been friendless, but he brought me. I've been lonely. Oh, don't leave me. Don't leave me, Jesus. Don't leave me. Don't leave me, Jesus. Don't leave. Don't leave me, Jesus. Don't leave me, Lord. I don't believe. No, no, no. I don't believe. No, 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 no. I don't believe. No, 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 no. I don't believe. No, no, no. I've been sick, but he brought me. I've been in trouble. He brought me. I've been friendless. Yes. I've been lonely. Oh, don't leave me. Don't leave me, Jesus. Don't leave. Through all the things I've been through, yes. Through all the things I've been through, no, I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. Praise the Lord.
To the mistress of ceremonies, wherever you are, the platform guests, wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen, after listening to the last two selections, if I had my Bible with me, I would rather take a text and preach to you a while. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to introduce the speaker. And it has always been said that the introduction should not be longer than the address. Well, if I would attempt to enumerate all of the achievements, awards, successes of the speaker tonight, I'm sure it would be longer than what she's going to say to you. So I'm not going to do that. I have known this individual before she was born. I knew her mother, I knew her father, I knew her grandfather, grandmother. We have been closely associated with this family down through the years. I have employed several of the members of this family. They work with me in the school system. There are others, nieces, nephews, and so forth. They attended school under my administration. I remember this individual when she was in high school. I remember her when she was in elementary school. I remember her when she was in college. She has always been an unusual personality. You could see from the beginning to the end that there were great things in store for her. She graduated from the, at that time, Carthage Colored High School under the administration of the late Professor A.L. Turner, the graduating class of 1942. It was something outstanding about that class, because out of that class there were only 14 members. And we have 3 doctors that came out of that class. Heenan Johnson, Jr., Robert Lee Perkins, and our speaker tonight. Out of those 14, I believe I saw one here tonight. Will you raise your hand? Earlene Field is a member of that class. I had a nephew in that class, John Wesley Williams, J.W. Williams, they called him. There was Bryce Robinson, Never J. Hudson. Oh, there was Zelma Brooks, Robbie Lee Perkins, the Douglas girls, and so forth and so on. That was an unusual class. Great things came out of that class. After completing her work at the high school level, co-valedictorian of the class, she and Robert Lee Perkin, she went to Texas College, where she did her undergraduate work. She made a name for herself there, and everyone knew that she passed that way. I would like to say tonight, just because this is Black History Week, and there is much confusion about education and the cost, the facilities. But when the speaker tonight finished high school, I was reminded of what Mark Hopkins said. A good teacher on one end of the log and a good student on the other end, you had a good school. After leaving Texas College, she furthered her education at the Harvard University's School of Medicine. There she made known from whence she came and the type of individual that she was. She made a name for herself. She has been an outstanding personality in the field of religion. Well, she had to be. Her grandfather was a minister, and so was her father. After enrolling in the medical school in Boston, Massachusetts, where she distinguished herself as a leader and as a student and a scholar, she received honor in many aspects of her work. She was the first African American woman to graduate from Harvard Medical School. She was named to the list of the 10 most admired conservative women in America by the Conservative Digest magazine. She is the founder or chartered member of the Right to Life movement and has led the fight for medical ethics across this nation. She is now the president of the Right to Life Crusade Incorporated. This individual has spoken upon many occasions throughout these United States, Canada, and Europe. She has endeavored to hold the light of education in all of her work. She has appeared on national television shows, and she has been an inspiration to many of the youth of this nation. She is presently serving as surgeon at the Boston School of Medicine, and she is also a professor at this particular institution. It's a pleasure, it's a privilege and honor of distinction to present to some of you and introduce to most of you Dr. Mildred Faye Jefferson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very, very much, my own friends and relatives. Some of you I may not have met until today, but I did not meet you as strangers because I never meet a stranger. I'm so delighted to be here because, frankly, I didn't know whether or not I would have an opportunity of coming by, and I really did feel quite badly to think of coming as near as Pittsburgh, which is only about 2 hours driving from here, and not having chance to stop in. It was a little over 20 years from the time I left until I got back again. In fact, I didn't get back until I came to bury my mother. She insisted on being buried in her family seat, and as you heard the Walnut Grove Choir, you can imagine why. She expected that she would never run out of relatives, and she'd certainly be cared for if she were here at home. And I think that is quite true. Most of the time, I am simply flying over to Houston, over to Dallas, over to the West Coast, over to Iowa, over to Baton Rouge, over to New Orleans, almost everywhere else but getting back here. So when I found out that the programs planned by the Northeast Texas Heritage Museum would end on Friday night, Mr. Holman, the president of their board of trustees, said, "If you want to go to Carthage, I'll drive you down there." But by then he had made contact with the editor of the Panola Watchman, Mr. McClure, and he came to cover the event last night, and I came back to Carthage with him, so here I am. And I am delighted that so many of you came out to visit, because they really did have less than a week to get the event together. But I can't tell you how delighted and excited I was to hear the beautiful music. Music was always a part of our lives. My mother could sing, my father could sing, my mother could play the piano, if only by ear, and many different people in our family played different instruments. Some compose music, but almost all of them can sing. But then almost all of the people in this area can sing. And I think it's because very early we get the idea that open your mouth and sing. No one minds very much if you don't stay on key. Eventually you learn to stay on key, or your ear improves. And some modern teachers say that anyone can learn to sing if you don't frighten them when they first start. As long as they can remember just to sing out, they are not all going to be of the quality of the singers in our choirs, but most people will learn to sing. The theme that I've tried to repeat in the different speeches and different gatherings I have been with since I arrived at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport at 9:45 yesterday morning has been to point out my gratitude to God that I had the opportunity of being born in Texas. Now, I was born actually in Pittsburgh. It doesn't have an H on it like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I thought it was because perhaps they couldn't afford it, but I found out yesterday that that wasn't really the case, that there was a family named Pitts, and because there were so many people in that family, someone made the joke one day, there's so many of you Pittses that you should come, this should be Pittsburgh, and that's how the name stuck. But I wasn't in Pittsburgh very long. I left when I was 6 months old, so I didn't remember a single thing yesterday. Not only that, but the parsonage of St. Beulah CME
Methodist Church is no longer there, so that bit of the environment that tied me to the area was gone. But they didn't hold that against me, and they actually have included me in the Northeast Texas Heritage Museum. So I am truly delighted. When I think of my beginning in Texas, one of the things I remember most is the fact that the very first school I attended was on land that had been given by my mother's family. And it was actually, the school was named for my mother's family. It was called the Roberts School. And the church at Walnut Grove was also built on land given by that family. So it's not likely that I could have started in this life without having a sense of support, almost a sense of destiny. Because from the earliest recollection that I have, there was never any question that I would go to school, that I would go to whatever extent my inclination or aptitude allowed. And at the time as I came up, not just in the small school, but in the other places that we went, there was always a sense of interest in education. Sometimes I believe that people do better in adversity than they do at times when everything goes well. I've never had any real sense of adversity. Since you know, my father was a minister and my mother was a teacher, you know very well that we did not have an abundance of material wealth. And you know very well that it has been the history of our region that from time to time there have been economic setbacks for different reasons. At the time that my mother was teaching in the smaller schools of this school system, the salaries were somewhat meager. But my mother was extraordinary because no matter how little she earned, she always had savings. And she always found a way of making sure that for whatever she had, she could make sure that her brothers who were younger would have her help when the farms had already yielded all they were going to, and they were in that period between the harvest and the beginning of the next year, that whatever she could do to help them provide for their families, she always did. And she set a very, very good example. But in many ways, she was well ahead of her time, because my education was always her first priority. And it never, ever occurred to me to wonder whether I was going to college, where I was going to college. My father was on the board of trustees of Texas College, which his CME denomination founded. So no matter how many other institutions there were in the world, there was no likelihood whatsoever that I would go anywhere else. Also, since I was just a little bit young, she would not have entrusted my welfare anywhere else. So the selection at that point was almost preordained. I don't have any really bad memories from my childhood. You know, it's the fashion now to write all of these stories about how terrible your childhood was and how awful the circumstances were in which you grew up, how terrible your parents were, and all of these horrible things that they did. Well, I haven't found out whatever these horrible things were that may have lurked in the dark pasts of either of my parents, but I can tell you, if I ever find out, you'll never know, because I'll never tell anyone. And no, I wasn't abused as a child. in the community, Walnut Grove, in which I grew up, partly up because in the very first years, from 6 months to 2 years to 3, I think I went around with my father to the different churches that he pastored in Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, maybe even South Carolina, and other parts of Texas. But as I got to the school years, Mother didn't want me to be shifted around, which is why I actually spent most of my early growing up in Walnut Grove, which is about 5 miles out, or it used to be 5 miles out. But now the city limits seem to be extended and extended so that it may even be in the city limits now. And no, even though that time was before the Brown 1954 school desegregation decisions, I don't really have any fixed memory of the social circumstances and conditions of that time, mainly because we lived in the kind of area and time where everyone knew everyone else, and there was not any particular consideration of the social aspects. For example, my mother finished her bachelor's degree by going to extension school, and those courses were conducted in the CCHS on Saturdays. So on Saturdays, while Mother was in classes, I usually was, should I call it downtown, in Mrs. Matthews' dress shop, and I would spend all day Saturday talking to Mrs. Matthews. I don't dwell on any of the unpleasant events. Most of the events of my life that other people would consider unpleasant, I don't really remember. And I don't remember because there is no point in my life in which I am going to dwell on the negative. And I will never, ever dwell on disappointments or things that didn't go right, because once you do that, you let the negative entrap you. And I have never been willing to spend that time on what's negative. But I also won't spend time with people who are negative. Oh, I'm friendly, and I still have that courtesy that was instilled in me in East Texas as part of our Southern heritage. So I don't tell them that I'm going to avoid them because I'm not going to let them pull me down with them. But I do avoid them because I remember those little aphorisms that we got in school. It's better to be alone than in bad company. And because I am an only child, it's very easy for me to be alone because I am never lonely, even though I am alone. So although for our visit this evening I will spend part of the time in reminiscence, I also will give you a little idea about how a professional in a very specialized area becomes a social activist. And I am doing it in this way because I am very sorry that our schedules didn't quite coincide, so that I will actually miss the career day once again. It will be just 1 week later than this visit, and I was not able to stay over quite long enough for that day. But I'm hoping between the taping we did this afternoon and some of the comments this evening that there may be something that can be edited and put together that can be used on career day. I remember very, very well the first time I was awake when someone went to get the doctor because someone was ill. If I'm not mistaken, it was our grandfather. And he had what I recognize now as a subacute bowel obstruction. And they had done all of the things that could be done in home remedies. And in spite of all that, he was getting worse by the minute. And because this was recognized as a dire and desperate circumstance, there was only one thing to do. They had to ride into town and get Dr. Baker. Now that was, I learned later, Dr. Alan Moore Baker. But when I first heard the name, I thought they were saying Dr. Alamo Baker, like remember the Alamo. And he came, he examined our grandfather on my mother's side, whom we referred to as Big Dad. And I could tell by the expression on his face that things were very serious. But he undertook to get the problem corrected. I didn't see exactly what he did, but he was there 2 or 3 hours. And at the end of the 2 or 3 hours, my grandfather was relieved of his acute picture, and even I, at 5 or 6 years old, could tell that he was better. That delighted me. Then over the next year or so, he had to come out once or twice again for different reasons. And I was very much impressed that every time he came, the people got well. And I had started following him around the time that he had come out the first time that I took note of it. And I would ask him questions, and instead of his sending me away by saying, oh, little girl, go along and play or something, he didn't. He would answer the questions. And one time when I finally said that when I grew up, I wanted to be a doctor, he said, well, now, if you want to do that, you just go right ahead. And I never did forget that. And when I did decide that that's what I wanted to do, I could always hear that. You just go right ahead. But that's not all I heard, because in my Texas childhood, reading everything that I could get my hands on, one of the things I read was a tattered copy of The Little Engine that could, as I recall, some puppy or the other must have gotten the book at one point because it was chewed at the corners. And actually, The Little Engine in that edition was red, and he was faded because I don't know whether the rain got on him or maybe someone drooled on him, but he was a little bit faded, but the words were still there. And I can still see that illustration of him chugging up the hill saying, I think I can, I think I can. And I can tell you, on the first Saturday of October in 1992, when I found out that the Jimmy Fund Clinic, which is a cancer clinic for children, had as its benefit walking the route of the Boston Marathon, I didn't find out about it in time to prepare for it, so I made a cold walk. And in that last 10 miles of that 26.2-mile hike, I had a cramp in my once broken skiing leg, and I had to walk that last 9 miles with a cramp that went from my thigh to my knee to my calf and back again. So you can be sure by the time I got to the end of that point 2, I was saying again, I think I can, I think I can. And at least I did. But as I remember our high school days, and of all of our adventures and misadventures, I remember a school motto, a class motto, a graduating class motto. And I can't even remember if it was our class or the class the year before. But the motto was, strive to seek, to find, and not to yield. So that long before Churchill said, never give in, never give in, never, 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 the words of that class motto had been stamped indelibly in my mind. Strive to seek, to find, and not to yield. But I can tell you I'm not trying to suggest to you that it's all been easy, all sweetness and light, all automatic. You know very well, any time that you are stepping onto an uncharted course, it's not going to be easy. As Principal Sanders pointed out, I have always stepped to a different drummer. And because if you do step to a different drummer, you know automatically that those who are going along with the rest of the band are going to be a little bit perturbed that you are stepping to that different drummer. But it was not until I got to the city of Boston that I ever encountered individuals who tried to set a limit to my aspirations or tried to limit the scope of what I might view as life. And I think that is one of the other reasons why I feel so blessed to have spent my formative years here in East Texas, because this is an area where the work ethic is still alive. And I don't have to go out and look for examples and what other people have read and other people have done. I can look around in my own family. My mother's youngest brother's family has received a citation from the high school here as having the largest number of graduates in one family. Someone else may have succeeded them by now, but at the year that I learned of the award, they had 11 children in that family who were graduated from high school in this school district. Every single one of them got a high school diploma. Those who were interested in advanced education were able to do that. Those who had other interests were able to do that. And I myself have used very often the example of one of my little cousins that came east hoping to go to school in Boston, but he had arrived too late to apply for admission to any of the schools. So he got 3 jobs that summer. That was at a time when Boston-educated students were walking around saying, oh, there was nothing to do. There were no jobs. But he took 3 jobs, the 3 that were available. They were not as vice presidents in any of the local firms. They were not as managers of any of the local stores. I think one was as a busboy, one may have been parking cars, one may have even been washing dishes. I don't even remember what they were. But this young man did not feel, because he was going to college, that he was too good to do those jobs. He knew that they were a means to an end. And he did what was required of that time to enable him to do what he had planned and hoped to do. And I have used that example very often because I know that students who have that attitude now will not be stopped. And it won't matter if their parents stop paying their bills, because they have not depended only on their parents. They have used their own resources. And yes, it won't even matter if the government loans and grants stop. They will not let that stop them in achieving their goals. And yes, if the private scholarship money that they might have expected dries up, they won't let that stop them. But you see, I can't go around trying to give some kind of inspirational message to students if I'm going to do something different. I can't go around asking my patients not to smoke if I am going to sit there blowing smoke in their faces. I'm not going to sit there and advise them on moderation in all things, including moderation itself, if I'm going to be the perfect example of indulgence to any and everything and addictions to any and everything that passes by. And if I'm going to suggest to people, whether they are students or graduates or beyond, that we cannot live or accomplish any objective without a sense of moral direction and moral commitment and the sense of a morally informed conscience for guiding choices and decisions, I can't very well say that to someone else if they can look at me and discover that I've lived my life staggering from one kind of moral collapse to another and one kind of accident to another. I think I'm also very blessed that I've never expected, as the song you heard said, it to be easy. Because I know it is not in the course of life to be easy if you are going to try to do what is right. And I don't ever have any question knowing what's right, because I learned very early, as do all of us who have the shared heritage in that Judeo-Christian tradition. We have the acknowledgement that there are moral absolutes. And yes, we do know right from wrong. And those of us who have our foundations in that tradition and in that heritage know very well that we share another moral commitment. When you recognize what is morally wrong, you have a moral obligation to correct it. You simply cannot take the position of seeing no evil, speaking no evil, hearing no evil. If you know it's wrong, you have to take the steps to try to correct it. That's not always easy, and it is not always going to make you popular. Because it's very, very easy to be popular when you're willing to do the wrong thing, or when you're willing always to go along just to get along. But you've got to look at one face in the mirror every single day that you are able to stand in front of a mirror. And it is that face and those eyes that you look into that are going to be the final judge. Because there are a lot of things you can do that no one else will even know about. You can get away with a lot of things sometimes. But the value of that training and learning early to start practicing trying to make the right decision and trying to make the moral decision and recognizing when you have failed and not pretend that you have when you haven't, at least you've got that moral satisfaction. But it becomes an almost automatic guide, so that when it might be easy to veer off the track, you get jerked back on the line, because practicing trying to make moral decisions makes moral decision making easier. And it becomes very much easier to withstand the blandishments of those who would pull you a different way. As you can tell, I don't get an over number of meals a day. I'm not starved anyway. I think I look well nourished. But I've never ever, not since high school anyway, had the habit of 3 meals a day. And because I don't make a habit of 3 meals a day, and because I never eat at any set time, then I don't get that signal and call and demand of my stomach that guides and controls the behavior and decisions of so many people. And because I don't get those signals, I don't have a great fear of hunger. And I don't have any fear of missing meals. And yes, if the schedule is tight enough, I will not even think about eating. And because of that, no one has ever been able to hold the leverage of a paycheck over me to make me do anything that I didn't want to do, or to make me do anything that went against my conscience or what I thought on considered judgment was the right course. It's much harder when the welfare of others depends on you and what you decide, but I don't have any children. And because I don't have any children, no one can get at me in that sense. There are a lot of decisions that people must make when others are dependent upon them. That's part of one's family obligation and responsibility. And I know it's not easy, but there still comes a point when nothing that the world offers is going to be worth going against what you know to be right. Choosing a course, a specialty, when I got to medical school wasn't hard for me. See, as a child, I've always been active. Active as a child, active now. I went into surgery because it requires action. Even the decision to do nothing has to be an active decision. But at the time I was in medical school, there were only 2 classes ahead of mine in which women were or had been admitted. And the only women who had been in those classes who were interested in going into surgery had been talked out of it. But I knew that that was the best field for me. I knew that that was where not only my interests, but my specific aptitudes and qualifications lay. And therefore, I was not to be distracted from that course. Because I was admitted as one of the very first women to the internship exams at the Harvard hospitals, they thought they had accorded me a great honor. But you see, near miss is never enough for me. So that I did not get a Harvard internship. I interned at Boston City Hospital. What I thought was a disadvantage turned out to be a great advantage, because at that time, Boston City Hospital was the 3rd largest hospital in the whole United States. Only Bellevue, New York, and Cook County in Illinois were larger. So that I went onto a service that gave me more experience in actual surgery in my first year of internships than some residents get in the first 3 years of their training. So that gave me experience and training as a surgeon, which advanced me in the hierarchy as we were advanced as residents. But that was not to be the end of the game. With as much difficulty as there was getting an internship in surgery, getting the chief residency was actually the most difficult hurdle. Now, everywhere along this course, there was this whole body of law, civil rights law, that had been passed, so that at almost every stage of the way, I could have sued any number of people. Sued them for excluding me from this, sued them for excluding me from that. But you see, without anyone having to tell me, I did use 1 or 2 of the brain cells. And it occurred to me that if you're going to train in surgery, number 1, it's a very long training program. And then after you're trained, you've got to get appointments on a staff. And you are going to encounter some of those people all the way from then and thereafter. So you might win this first stage, but that very likely is going to be the end of the line, because whoever is going to hire you down the road is going to call back to where you were. But who wants to be in a game that someone lifts you from the sideline and just drops you in? Wouldn't you rather be prepared for that game and ready to play the game according to what's going on the field? Of course you would. That's what I did. Took longer. Took far longer than I had planned to. I perhaps am the very best trained surgeon that's ever been produced in the United States. Because from the time I started my surgical internship until I did my chief residency and got my final specialization in general surgery, which was to become a diplomate of the American Board of Surgery, I had done the equivalent of 3 complete general surgical residencies, having gone from the beginnings of organ transplantation to the very refinement of organ transplantation, having gone from the beginnings of vascular surgery to its refinement in cardiovascular surgery, and having had experience in every single division of surgery that exists. So what sometimes looks as a disadvantage on one hand eventually turns out to be a blessing. And through all that, I eventually became the first woman to be elected to membership in the Boston Surgical Society. And some of those people I could have sued along the way then had their thumbs in their suspenders saying, oh, you know, I had a part in her training. But you have to keep a sense of humor about it all, so that many of you may wonder why, after all that time going through all those things, having spent all that time gaining all that experience, I would veer into the public policy tract as an activist. Because generally, when someone thinks of an activist, one thinks of everything that I'm not. So you may wonder how I became a social policy activist. Well, it goes back to the theme that I have been repeating over and over. The roots, the frame, the foundation of everything I am is in that East Texas framework. My attitude toward myself, my attitude toward other people was shaped then, there, here, in this small city and in the areas around. It goes back to that moral tradition, recognizing what you think is morally wrong and understanding that someone has to act to correct it, and that someone is the one who has recognized it. It goes back to this matter of who will do it. For every operation I don't do in the city of Boston, there will be 20 other surgeons fighting to do that case. But when it comes time to correct the things that everybody sits complaining about, who is coming? A lot of the times you can count on no hands the number of people who are going to take that extra step to correct what they're complaining about. Well, I am willing to take that step. I feel that the work that I am doing in the social policy arena is every bit as vital as anything I have done in the formal practice of medicine, because I see this as my obligation as a citizen and a physician who is a surgeon. I believe that the doctor has responsibilities as a citizen that are beyond providing for the health care needs of the people. And I believe that those who can take the time to honor the other duties of citizenship must indeed do that. Because every citizen, to the extent that he or she understands or can, must work to defend our freedom, must work to defend what our America is. Because if we do not defend our rights as citizens by honoring the duties and obligations that citizenship entail, then we will be no more than slaves in a free country, and we will not deserve our freedom. We aren't free people by chance. We aren't free people by luck. People have died that we may be free. And that dying didn't start just in this century or the last century. This nation of ours, our America, was conceived in the battle of war. And our freedom, the words of the Declaration of Independence, are almost written in the blood of those who fell when our country had to explain to the world and had to justify why we would no longer be subject to the British crown. It does not matter to me at all that at the time the Declaration of Independence was written, slaves were counted as property or 3/5 or whatever. Not any of that matters, because the Constitution of the United States and its amendments have stood the test of time, and it has become a foundation document for establishing a great government that covers all of us. All of us as citizens of the United States, and even those who are visitors to the United States, are covered by the protections and provisions of that Constitution. And it is my duty and obligation as a citizen to make the Constitution work. I don't depend on anyone else to make it work for me. In Boston, some of you may have seen the news clips when the South African Nelson Mandela was visiting. Oh, the streets were filled, and people came from far and wide to greet Nelson Mandela, who had been released from prison so he can continue his fight for freedom in South Africa. And so many of the people, especially those of African descent, were there on the streets of Boston waving and waving to Nelson Mandela. Well, of that assembly of those with brown faces like mine who were waving to Nelson Mandela, I would guess not more than 40% of them were even registered to vote. Here they were, waving at Nelson Mandela, who was born under the table, fighting even to get into the chair so he could reach the tabletop. And here were they, born sitting at the table, and they won't even reach over and get the knife and fork so they can participate in the meal of freedom and participatory democracy. No, I am not going to wait for someone else to defend my constitutional rights and defend my freedom. You see, while we physicians and nurses and others involved in the healthcare system in general are going in the comfortable groove of home, hospital, and office, trying to do what we are committed and obliged to do to help protect your health and to restore you to health with the help of God when you are ill or injured, great and sweeping social changes are taking place in our society. And the healthcare needs, the practice of medicine, creates a very effective ground, a very effective battlefield for using the people and the people's needs for trying to bring about social change in the country. But what kind of change is being brought about? And how is it going to benefit the people? If organized medicine does not participate in knowing and understanding what this change is and provide the guidance and direction in shaping this change, we are likely to end up with circumstances that not any of us will appreciate. Because it is my great fear that there will be the effort to use the fears of people to not only pull a nationalized, socialized medicine scheme onto the citizens of the United States, but to use the healthcare system for moving our country away from democracy, being a democratic republic based on a capitalistic free enterprise system, to pull them toward what the rest of the world is trying to escape. Even that socialist paradise of Sweden is trying to escape socialism. On the surface, socialism may look very inviting. The state, the government, taking care of people from the cradle to the grave, no one falling out of the safety net, no one falling below the poverty level. It's a pipe dream. A pipe dream. Even in this socialist paradise of Sweden, and I haven't checked within the last 5 years to see whether things have been corrected. A young couple getting married may have to wait anywhere from 5 to 8 years to get a certain kind of apartment. That's almost as bad, or maybe as bad, as things existed in what was once the Soviet Union. The taxation, the burden of taxation that has to pay for all of that, and the social engineering, the social planning adjustments that have to be made, the scaling down of all aspirations, rather than having anyone achieve too much, put a ceiling on it. You still can't prevent people from falling below what we consider acceptable, because whether it was in the Soviet Union, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or in that socialist paradise that Sweden is, people still, because of their own choices, activities, behavior, will fall below. But you see, I know, as you do too, if you will just check into what happens in those countries, that there is no socialist or communist country that has the diversity of population that we do, that could live in anything that even approaches the harmony in which our different people live together. I am never trying to suggest in any way that problems do not exist or that we have solved all the problems. But I am suggesting that if the rest of the world ever learns to live together with different people, then they must accept and look at what has been the basic model of the United States and not what someone is trying to supplant this model with, which is a sort of hodgepodge amalgam of different things that have just destroyed so much of the rest of the world. Whether it is tribalism run amok in Somalia, where people were destroying each other and letting the others starve to death until, led by the United States, this multilateral force got there to try to keep them apart until some sanity could seep in, and those are all people of the same color. Or in Northern Ireland, where there still is no foreseeable solution to their terrible dissension, terrible and bloody dissension. The problem there is religion, and those are all people of the same color. Look into Belgium, where you've got the Flemish who want one language. You've got others who want a different language. And they're almost always at the point of some kind of bloody warfare over the matter of language, and they're all the same color. And look at what was once Yugoslavia, with the absolute annihilation of people on religious grounds, on I don't know what other grounds. Even if they may not be all quite the same tent, they are at least, T-I-N-T-S, they are part of the same racial lines. I don't know whether it's religion, I don't know whether it's tribes, I do not know what it is. Is it language? What is it? But they are not even interested in bridging those hatreds. And I don't want that transplanted here. I want us to be able to show, because we who are born here in our country, in this place, in Texas, are still all one people. We don't speak different languages. We may sound a little bit different as we say the same languages, but we still speak the same language. We eat the same food. We know each other. So we have the opportunity of coming together and working in harmony in a way that may not be possible in Queens, New York, or in Brooklyn, or some of these other places where people have come from different places who have never ever been interested very much in living together. But we can. And because I am concerned about the attempt to use medicine as a way of luring our country away from its dedication as a democratic republic, I have moved out of that protected groove, moved out into a different arena. You know, we as medical doctors live in a rather protected world. You know, within the hospitals, we are in about the best position you can be if you want to have a domain. You know, at home, the parents have a domain, and they are very much in charge. Still, here in most of the families in East Texas, I'm sorry, I can tell you some places where parents are even afraid to correct a 3-year-old. But as I have observed here in East Texas, parents still seem to be in charge at home. Well, generally, in the hospitals, we as medical professionals, whatever our specialties are, can still expect to be in charge. Well, when you come out into the outside world and you get involved in organizations, you are not in charge. And you've got to win the support, you've got to win the confidence of people. And it's not so easy. But again, since I don't expect the things to be easy, I'm always willing to pitch in there and keep plodding and keep trying. And I know it is so very, very necessary now. As you look at your own hospital, and I had an opportunity to go for a tour of the hospital this morning, And when I remembered what we didn't have when I was a child, and even as I have just glanced over in this direction in the past few years that I've had chance to get back, it has been quite thrilling to see the outer growth of the hospital, but to today have the opportunity of going through it. I really was quite gratified. It appears to be a wonderful hospital, and you have a splendid staff. So I hope you as a community are offering them your every cooperation. And you know, hospitals can always use volunteers. So those of you who do have some time or find that you have some time, go down, sign up with the coordinator of hospital volunteers. Take that as a church project, a community project. I'm sure it would be well appreciated because they certainly deserve every support of the community. But I want that wonderful hospital to be able to continue growing and following the plans that they have established as a community hospital. I don't want them to become what I heard of as a child. I remember stories. I'm sure they may have been apocryphal. But you know, the only hospital that people knew about or could expect to attend was the charity hospital in Shreveport. And people had stories about the charity hospital. They had the feeling that people did not go there to get well, that people went there to die. And there was even a story about a black bottle that might be shown, that you might expect. And I don't want those times to come back. You're saying, oh, well, you know, you're exaggerating. That sort of thing could not come back today. Do you really believe that? Don't you know that every time you hear the term cost containment, you've got the specter of the black bottle and the injection in the background? Because cost containment looks at the hospital in terms of what the hospital should yield in revenue, forgetting that the hospital doesn't exist just to be a hospital. The hospital exists so that people who need care can come where the specialist and the equipment and the people are who can help restore them to health. And if they can't restore them to health, at least they can alleviate the suffering. And no, hospitals don't exist just to be hospitals. And no, you're not going to have experts who retain their expertise if they're just going to have the fancy equipment there. So you say we have it in the community, but no one has access to it. If we in the United States had a system like that in England, at age 65, you may not get into the coronary care unit. You may not get into the intensive care unit. You may not even do more than visit the emergency room, because you may be just allowed to die, as someone else made the predetermination that you had little likelihood of recovering, and that maybe you weren't worth that extra expenditure that it would take to give you that care, without which they really cannot evaluate whether or not you have a good chance of living. And no, I am not going to change what I understand the role of the doctor to be. I became a physician in the tradition that is represented in the Hippocratic Oath. There are some medical schools today that have dropped the Hippocratic Oath. You may take the oath of Maimonides. You may attest to the World Health Organization statement. You may even, as some schools do, let you write your own. But I became a doctor in that Hippocratic tradition. Not the Hippocratic tradition alone, of course, because the Hippocratic tradition comes from a pagan time, representing, as Edelstein points out, the period when the Greeks separated killing and curing functions of the doctor and obliged the society not to ask the doctor to kill. It's been modified, of course, so that it has finally come down to the point that it does embody the moral tradition that we share in that Judeo-Christian tradition. And it is in that tradition, that ethical tradition, in which medicine has gained the respect that it has when it adheres to that tradition. But if we move toward that socialist model, most of that will be swept aside. That covenant between doctor and patient, that obligation of the doctor to do no harm, may be swept aside. Because when the doctor is asked instead to provide not just for the health care needs, but then to try to adjust the social conditions by adjusting those who would either suffer the conditions or cause the conditions, then we are moving along a very dangerous course indeed. It's only a little more than half century that Germany stood as a great nation, standing on the world stage exactly where we are standing today. A powerful nation. No one was considered finished in science or in medicine who had not had some period of training in Germany. In that country, the most intelligent professors of that country fell for a very simple notion that there are some people who are simply unworthy to live, and these people are burdens on the society. Doctors are in best position to relieve the society of such burdens, and doctors should suffer no penalty for removing those social burdens from the society. And the great professors and the intelligentsia of Germany took those lessons to heart. Before there was a single euthanasia law on the books of Germany, these doctors were willing to correct the social problems. They started off by trying to relieve the problem of mental illness in Germany. And they undertook to do that by removing the mentally ill. Then they had to do something about all of those who were too badly injured in war still running up the bills. So they were next. Then, as they looked at those who had defects which disqualified them from showing the German people in the superiority that those who were conducting the programs wanted to show, then they started removing the children who were defective, those who had defects. And some of those defects became such simple things as badly modeled ears or the behavior aberration of bedwetting. The Jews weren't included at that time because they weren't pure enough to be involved in the programs anyway. So that the models for purifying the people by removing those who were unfit started before there was a single euthanasia law on the books of Germany. And yes, when the time came for that final solution of ridding their country of those troublesome Jews, plus the gypsies, plus those Germans who would not accept the Dritte Reich or the Third Reich, it was very easy. And yes, the Germans were very precise. They did not do anything without a model. And no, the sterilization programs of Nazi Germany would have never taken place had there not been Margaret Sanger's, the founder of the birth control movement, sterilization clinics in California. And when the time came to work out a way of dealing with mass removal of people, a simple program was worked out using gas in the showers. And the project was worked out with such detail that even the stories that were to be told the inmates to encourage them to get into the buses without complaining, and even to the parents and friends and relatives of those who were selected, had stories so that no one minded. And when the results of the gas in the showers project model was presented to the most prestigious medical body assembled at that time, and the president of the German court heard the reports of the experiments, heard the reports of using the sulfa drugs on the gangrenous limbs of Polish and other medical students who were then condemned to die. Because the president of the German court did not offer any objection, his lack of objection was interpreted as having the lethal and legal permission. And the programs were started. When the U.S. Supreme Court in 1973 handed down decisions on abortion which gave to my hand an almost unlimited license to kill, the High Court of the United States formally put the United States on the same course that National Socialist Germany followed a little over 50 years ago. Because the High Court of the United States said at that time, killing people, a professional serial killer, and at this moment he is between the law so that they cannot prosecute him as he goes spreading death and destruction. I knew it would come to this, and because I knew it, I did not stand waiting until we could convene a tribunal like the one that tried the doctors and scientists of Germany at Nuremberg. And because I know I am not going to wait to see if the world today could convene a tribunal like the one at Nuremberg, because I will not give up the role of doctor as healer to become the new social executioner. And I will use every legal means available to free people in a free country to see that the majority of my fellow physicians and the majority of my fellow citizens will never give that stamp of approval. I love my country. I love this America. I love this democratic republic. If I wanted to live in a socialist country, I could move to one. This is my own, my native land, and it is here that I will make my stand. And because I do love my country, I will not stand by idly and let this great land of ours, this land that really does have hope for everyone who will make whatever effort he or she can. Because I don't want it ever to become just an exclusive reservation where only the perfect, the privileged, or the planned have the right to live. Thank you.
All right, Sister Beck,